And at 14 was when I realized, this is what I want to do. And he's like, this is for CBS 46 News. And I literally almost passed out. Everything is changing. We're now going to digital. And there's now a new way of what we should be doing and how people take in the news. And I was so honored to be covering history because that's what we covered. But I think the biggest thing is just creating content. Just be really active. Whatever you want to do, go for it 100%.
Muy buenas tardes, bienvenidos nuevamente a otro podcast de Mega Business Podcast. Bienvenida, Kayla, a nuestro podcast. ¿Cómo estás?
I'm good, and you?
I forgot. We're going to do this in English. Well, welcome once again. We would like to thank you for coming out and spending some time with us and telling us about your career, your professional journalism. So let's get started. How do you get into journalism?
I got into journalism. Basically, my grandmother was my inspiration. Growing up in the Bronx, we didn't live in a good neighborhood back then. It's gotten a little bit better now, but growing up in that neighborhood, our parents didn't really allow us to go out and do regular neighborhood things and, enjoying time with friends and stuff like that, just because, like I said, the neighborhood was pretty bad. So I would just go upstairs to my grandmother's house because we lived in a 3-family house, all of us. Latinos, they stay together. And every time I would go up to my grandmother's house, she was always watching the news. The abuelas love the news. And ever since I was 7 years old, I used to watch the news with her. And growing up, I didn't know I could make that into a profession until I was about 14, where, I continued throughout the years to go home, watch the news. And at 14 was when I realized, this is what I want to do. I want to become a journalist. And from that moment on, I followed it and went to college for journalism. And that's how I became a journalist.
Was there a personality on the news that said, that's the one that motivates me the most out of any particular channel that you remember?
No, there wasn't a specific person, but it was funny because as I was growing up and I would tell people I want to be a journalist, people would say, oh, you remind me of Jackie Guerrera. I believe that's her name. Yeah, but there wasn't a specific journalist that I saw that I wanted to be like or I could say was my inspiration. It was just watching the news and seeing how these journalists got these stories. That's what inspired me the most.
Gotcha. And your background is Puerto Rican, right?
Yes, I'm full Puerto Rican.
But born and raised in in New York or in Puerto Rico?
No, I was born and raised in the Bronx.
What was some of the work that you have done over there?
So when I was getting my bachelor's degree, I worked for the newspaper, my school's newspaper. It was called the Impact newspaper. And I did that for several months. And I just covered events in New York City, stories in the Bronx. And I also ran the entertainment column. So I was just doing local Bronx stories, local New York stories, and then entertainment stories where I would go to concerts and write an opinionated column on those entertainment stories. And then when I took some time off after I graduated, I took about 2 years off to figure out what I wanted to do. And it was always a goal of mine to go to grad school. So after 2 years, I applied for grad school. I got in. And while I was in grad school was when I did majority of my reporting. So I reported in, again, New York City. I was working for the New York City News Service. So I was doing a bunch of stories through there. I was also doing video stories. I did a story on the history of graffiti in the South Bronx. That story I did while I was interning at a TV station in New York as well. But one of my biggest stories, and one of the stories I have to say I'm most proud of is for my thesis for grad school, I did a documentary. So I shot it, I covered it, I reported on it, edited everything. And it was a documentary on cold cases in the Bronx. So I focused on 2 young men who unfortunately lost their lives and followed their mothers who were now searching for justice. And that documentary was it was picked up by a film festival in New York.
Wow. That's. I mean, you edited it.
Yeah, I put it
You
together. I
put the
shot
whole
it.
thing together, shot
Yeah.
it. You did the voiceover too on everything.
No, I didn't have any voiceovers just because I felt like the story was powerful enough on its own. So I let the mothers tell the stories of their sons who
Oh
are now
wow.
not here.
Wow, that's a unique point of view. The way you, I mean, obviously there are a couple out there, but that was how do you pick that's that subject, that category?
So my inspiration for that documentary was actually one of the young men that I was focusing on was actually one of my good friends. He was stabbed to death when he was 16, 16 years old, 17 years old. And, I knew I always wanted to do a story on this because it hit so close to home and he meant so much to me. And I had such a good relationship with his mom. I knew that she would be perfect for this documentary. And then I found another story of this young man who was, I believe, 19 when he died, and he was shot in the face in the Bronx. So these mothers basically told the stories of their sons and how they were seeking justice for them. So that was my inspiration behind that, really emotional documentary.
Besides that, when I was doing a little bit of research and we talked about this, over the phone, where you won, you and your group, right? You won an award.
It was a group project, and it was we knew we had to come up with something to report on as a whole, and we were really just confused. We didn't know what we wanted to do as a collective because, in group projects, it's so hard to pick a topic. But there was one topic that I think resonated with all of us, and we felt that it would be a good story, which was the minimum wage in New York City and how it was imperative that it should be $15 an hour. And we followed the lives of several hospitality workers and talked about them getting tips and what they would make hourly. And we told that story in several different forms. We did it in a written form, we did it in audio form, and we also did it in a video form. So it's like a website basically, and you go to it and you can go down all the different pages and you'll see everyone's stories. And we got our professor submitted our work for an AC Press Award, and luckily we won an AC Press Award for
Wow,
that story.
that's wonderful. And how long ago was this?
This was in 2016.
So it wasn't too long ago.
No, it was a few years ago, but yeah, all the stories that I did during grad school, it was, I would say, professional. Although we were in school, we were still telling these stories, and we had the ability to pitch it to other stations, to other newspapers, and so a lot of people got their work picked up. So everything we did was very professional and definitely helped our portfolio for when we wanted to get out into the real world.
Right. So now talking about the real world,
Yeah.
you moved to Atlanta, which was culture shock, right?
Yes,
It's
it still
another
is.
world. So how did that happen? How do you end up moving down to Georgia?
Funny story. It's my brother's fault we're here.
It's your brother's fault. Let's blame it on the brother, right?
It is his fault. It is. It's his fault because my brother is studying to be a virologist. So he wants to discover viruses. So he's going to make us a lot of money.
Okay. There you
And
go.
so he's had this passion for as long as we could remember. He just turned 21 last week, and he's always said that was his passion. And so he said, oh, I want to go to GSU. They have a good science program there. And, living in a Latin family, you stick together. And he's the baby of the family. It's three of us. So I'm the oldest, and it's my sister, and then it's him. So he's the baby. So, of course, mommy wasn't going to let the baby go to another state by himself. So the truth is, even though we say it's his fault, God just really opened up the doors for everyone involved. Like, unknowingly, this was happening behind closed doors. And he said, hey, I want to go to Georgia. At the time, he was a junior. And my mom was like, okay, when you start college, we'll move. I had already told them, deuces, I'm not going to Georgia. I'm not going to Atlanta. I was in grad school at the time, so I was ready to really take on the world professionally. Like I said, I'm born and raised in New York, so all my connections and resources were there. And I was ready to fly. I was like, I'm not going to Georgia. Sorry, guys. And my dad had told his job at the time, hey, listen, because he can work from anywhere. His job is nationwide. And he said, hey, guys, if there's ever an opening in Georgia, just wanted to let you know that, I'm interested. Now, those jobs don't come, they don't come often. The people who hold those jobs are there forever. And literally, like, I don't know, a month, 2 months later, they called my dad and was like, hey, we have an opening. Like, you'd have to move in 2 weeks.
So
like,
things just kind of happen.
yeah, they just happened. And so while my family had this plan to move a year after, they moved a year prior. And
So
so,
the universe push you.
y-
But how do you get involved into that? Do you live with them at the time, or
no, I
or you just
didn't.
didn't want to be left behind?
No, I didn't. We lived 3 blocks away. I had my own apartment, and I lived 3 blocks away from my family. And again, when they said they were leaving, I said, okay, I love you guys. This is the end of the road for us, but I'm not moving to Georgia. And literally, my family made the decision to move. They packed their bags and they said, okay, we are leaving. Was it like Christmas Eve? They said, we're leaving Christmas Eve.
Just
You
confirming with
know?
the sister here.
Yeah, they said, we're leaving Christmas Eve. So this is it, Kayla. Like, if you're not coming with us, like, this is it. And I was like, I'm not going with you. And literally, November, I don't remember the day, but like 2 weeks into November, I found out I was pregnant.
Oh wow!
I found out I was pregnant, and I was like, I have to move.
Was it
I have
because
to
of
move.
grandma, the grandpa?
Yeah, because, well, I'm the oldest. I was having a daughter, and she's the first grandchild and only grandchild. And just being a woman and this being a first time mom, I knew there was absolutely no way I can stay in New York and have my baby. I need my
You
mom.
had you needed the
Yeah, the
support.
support. My mom, even though, her dad's side is very involved, and I know that if we would have stayed in New York, they would have definitely supported us and helped
Right.
us. But there's nothing like your first child and having your mom really just guide you throughout the way. And I just knew she would never let me live it down if her first and only grandchild is living in New York and she's in Georgia. So we made the decision to move with them, and we did.
So it was a family situation when you
It
say,
was.
okay, let's stick together.
Yes, it definitely was.
And how was the change? Let's say first, let's talk about professional.
Mm-hmm.
You were already working there. You already had your connections.
Yeah.
You were already involved. I mean, you know your city. You know how to get around.
Yes.
You know how to get stories, all of that good stuff, right?
Yes.
And then you moved to a place. Have you ever even visited Atlanta or not?
No. I've never visited Atlanta prior to moving here. My family did. They came out here, I think, once or twice to kind of get a feel of it, to see if it was something they were going to do, even though they knew they were going to move. But I guess just to get acclimated with the city, they visited, I think, once or twice. But during those times, I was in school and I was working, so I couldn't take off to go visit with them. And again, in my mind, I was never moving with them, so I had no reason to go out there.
And once you moved down here, I mean, how was it? How was the transition? Was it easy? Were you able to find a job real quick? I mean, I know you were pregnant, but were you working in media at the time, or how did that happen? Tell me
No.
more about that.
No, I was not working. I absolutely hated it. I hated living out here. I love it now. I've grown to really like it now, and I appreciate it now.
At the beginning, though,
In the beginning, no.
What do you hate about it?
So again, coming from the Bronx, coming from New York, coming from a city like New York, you move to Atlanta, and we didn't move to the city of Atlanta. We moved to the suburbs in Atlanta. So we weren't far away. We were only like 20 minutes away. But it's just different. Like, I lived in the city my whole life. So this was my first time living in the suburbs. and it was a culture shock. You come from, again, New York City, which is like the melting pot. You walk outside your door and you're seeing all these different cultures, religions, and
You,
then you move to this place and you don't see a lot of people like you. You have to drive everywhere. I came out here, I've never had a license.
wow.
I didn't have a license. I didn't have a
How old were you
car.
at the time?
I was 25.
And here in Atlanta, like at 16, 15,
Ex-
they're trying to get that license because it's like
yeah.
freedom.
And in New York, it's the opposite. You have 30-year-olds who don't have their license because you have the transit system. You have a train, you have the bus.
Everything's closed too.
Yeah, everything is super close. Where I used to live, I lived in Throgsneck, which was the Throgsneck section of the Bronx, and it was great because when I would walk out my door, everything was in one block. 1 to 2 blocks, you had the hair salon, you had CVS, you had Rite Aid, you had a club, you had Spanish food, you had a bodega, nail salon, everything.
Tell me more about that. You did mention a little bit more about, the Latino community being just like everywhere, and you come down here
Yeah.
and there's barely any Latinos, mostly to the area that you had moved, right? Which was a little bit outside of Atlanta. Kennesaw, I think, was the city.
Yeah, I moved to Kennesaw when I moved out here.
And there was a lot of Latinos over there, or not at all? There's
No.
still now.
No. And what was hard also was that I was pregnant. So coming to a new city, I really couldn't go out and make friends. I really couldn't go out to, where you go to like a bar, a lounge. I didn't do that because I was pregnant and I didn't have anyone. And so the only person that like was getting a social life was my brother because he was in school here. So he knew people, and my husband was working, so he made friends and stuff like that. But yeah, it was hard because I didn't know anyone. I was pregnant, so I was home all day, every day, and there
So
wasn't that many Latinos. No,
it was a hard transition, to say the least.
It was really hard. Within the first 6 months, I was ready to go. I think maybe the first 3 months,
Okay.
I was ready to go.
What about after you had the baby and you obviously were trying to get back into your career, your field, journalism? How did it work out real quick, or tell me more about that?
No, my time here was really hard trying to find a job. When I first came out here, I was super confident. I said, I am Latina, I have a master's degree, I have experience, and I'm from New York. People definitely want to hire people from New York because it's fast paced where they come from. They adapt easily. I said, I'm going to get a job so soon. Like, I was afraid because I was like, I'm 3 months pregnant now. I'm going to get a job super fast. And I didn't get a job until a year later. It was, it was, a year later, more or less, give or take. I was applying to jobs while I was pregnant, and I wasn't hearing back. And the ones that I would hear back from, they were just telling me that they went with another candidate. So I was growing very, I was scared. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get a job out here. And then at the same time, I had friends who I graduated with, during this time. They had all gotten jobs in New York in a professional setting, in news stations. I have a friend who works for Rolling Stone and like all these different places where I was like, I want to work there. And so they were telling me, hey, you come back to New York, I got a job for you.
Were you thinking about going back
Yeah.
and leaving Atlanta behind?
I was.
Like a little nightmare or something like that?
Yeah, I was like, Mom, I'm sorry, but I think I'm going to have to go back to New York because I'm not going to get a job. And my parents always told me, trust in God, trust in God, trust in God. Things will fall into place, and they definitely did.
Now, when you say they did, I know that you worked for CBS at one point,
Yes.
which is, here in Atlanta, there's not a lot of stations compared to New York. And you were telling me there's like a whole bunch in New York, but here there's like a couple of networks that are, literally like maybe 5 at the most that are the biggest stations for television, which is really what you were more interested in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how did that happen with CBS? How do you get in that? How did that happen? Because let me tell you, we already know it's a very small market in a sense of very niche. Not a lot of people get into, radio is kind of small too. That's
Mm-hmm.
my background, but TV I think is even smaller because it's not just about the voice, it's about the experience where you have to be out there. It has to do with the attitude, like I mean, a
Yeah.
lot. I think, before the interview, I was telling you, radio is a lot easier doing video now.
Yeah.
It's a whole different story. And you seem to get that down really good. But
Mm-hmm.
how did you manage to get the CBS job?
By
How did
the
that work out? Tell me the whole story.
Okay, by the grace of God, again, I got this job at CBS 46. So, like I mentioned, I was growing weary. I was like, I'm never gonna get a job in journalism. That was really my outlook. My whole family can tell you. And in fact, I was growing so weary that I was looking for jobs outside of my field, which I thought I would never do. Again, I have a master's degree, I have experience. Why am I looking for jobs outside of my field? And the first job that I got before CBS 46 was actually at the city of Marietta. So I was working for human resources. I was working under the human resources director. And I was there for a few months. And it was great because, again, first time mom, I wasn't away from my daughter for too long. But in doing that, I was still every day applying to jobs on LinkedIn, on Indeed, that had journalism. And so, again, by the grace of God, I saw this job. I was at this point, I didn't know what I was applying for. I was just anything that had journalism, apply, apply, apply. And I was applying to so many jobs that I forgot what I applied for. And one day while I was at work, the chief photographer at CBS 46, who was once my boss, he called me and he said, "Hey, I got your application for this position. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about it. And if you're interested." And I'm like, what did I apply to? And then at the end of the conversation, I didn't want him to know that I didn't know what I had applied for. But I said, "Oh, yes, sure. I'm interested. And where is this for again?" And he's like, "This is for CBS 46 News." And I literally like almost passed out. And I was
But you
like,
knew you knew about that station already, though.
no, I didn't.
At all? Like, you
At
didn't know
all.
how much.
I didn't know anything
Oh,
because,
okay.
like I said, when I first got out here, it was really hard because I didn't, again, I grew up in New York, so I know the news stations, I know the publications, I know where I wanted to work. But out here, I didn't know any of the TV stations, I didn't know any of the publications, I didn't know anything. So, and even trying to research, I still didn't know what was out here.
So that was a blessing.
That was a CBS News.
Yeah, I mean, out of the blue, right? I
Yeah.
mean, obviously you did apply, but
Mm-hmm.
but still. So
Yeah, it was huge. It was huge. So I went for the interview. I was so nervous. My boss was interviewed me. He said, "Listen, I saw your work. I see that you don't have much experience because at the time, again, I'm not familiar with this stuff. I didn't know that I was working in a top 10 market. That's unheard of. Getting a job out of grad school, having time off, seeing that there was a gap in my resume, and I'm working in a top 10 market. I didn't even know that there were different market ranks.
yeah,
There's people who start at market 300, 200,
right.
and here I am in market 10. It's actually higher than 10, but in a top 10 market, that's huge. And so
How do you feel when I mean, what were the feelings that you were having when you find out, wait a second, this
Mhm.
is not just some little station. This
This
market
is
is a lot
CBS.
bigger.
Mhm.
Because that goes on your resume, like I work in this market, and people
Mhm.
look at it different.
Yeah.
Middle of the country where the station is probably like the population is probably like 10,000.
Yeah, it was amazing. I honestly didn't think I was gonna get the job because after I knew I had sold myself with him, and what he said was, I know that you're young, I know you don't have a lot of experience, but what I did see, I liked, and I feel like you can give these old timers a run for their money because again, everything is changing. We're now going to digital, and there's now a new way of what we should be doing and how people take in the news. And so that was his main thing was, I need you to teach these old timers that things are changing.
Right.
Then I had an interview with the news director the same day, and I was like, I didn't get this job. She was so hard on me, and I was like, I fought back, but I was like, I don't know. I honestly, after that interview, I just put in the back of my mind, I said, I definitely didn't get that job.
did you start it like right? I mean, after obviously you did get it, but when you started, did you start it right on the air, or how did it work?
No, so the position that I had applied for was actually a video position. It wasn't an on-air position, and so I took the job because I felt like this was my way in. This is my way to wheeze my way in and to.
And what were you doing?
I was doing video. So I was working part-time. I was working on the weekends, and I was basically, again, pre-COVID, I was covering concerts, festivals, just like those fluffy news stories that you see on
But you were
weekends.
putting your own little flavor to it.
Yeah, I would go to these events with my camera, all my camera equipment, my tripod, my big camera, my microphone, and I would go and I would shoot video, and then I'd interview a few people. So it was great. Honestly, I felt like that job, believe it or not, was for me because, again, coming from Atlanta, I mean, excuse me, coming from New York, I didn't know anyone in Atlanta, and going to these different events. I was doing 4, 5, 6, 7 events in a day, and I was meeting, city council members, and I was meeting police officers, firefighters. I interviewed
So
the
in a way,
mayor.
you were getting to know the city. You were networking.
Yes.
You were, just making connections.
Yeah, I was making connections, and I even got to interview some like crazy celebrities I never thought I'd get to interview in doing this job. So it was perfect for me. And then I was when I got the job, I told my boss, like, okay, I love my job, but this is not what I want to do. Like, I want to eventually get on air. And he was so supportive. He said, I'm going to back you 100%. And so I spoke with the news director at the time and told him what I wanted to do, and he was like, yeah, just pitch me some ideas and go
So
out and
then you went
report.
full time, right?
Yeah. So then after about, I believe it was 8 months of doing that job, I became full time.
And then how did it change? Like what,
I
the
was working.
stories.
Oh man, it changed drastically because from working 8 to 5 Saturday and Sunday, now I was thrown in 5 days a week, and I was working night side. So I was going into work at 2:30, and I was working. I'm sorry, 3 to midnight. So that was hard, as a young woman working those hours late at night, and now it went from doing these nice fluffy stories to now breaking news. So it shifted now to murders and homicides and kidnappings and
And I wanted to ask you about that because
yeah.
I did see on your Instagram page you have a couple of clips there where you were in the middle of the pandemic too, doing some interviews
Yes.
pre and post,
Yes.
like right in the middle. Meaning, I mean, you were out there for the march.
I
You
did
know,
protests,
Right.
COVID, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's dangerous. How?
Yeah.
I'm looking at it and I'm like, I didn't even want to go down there. And she was like in the middle. And
Yeah.
then there's random people coming up to you too,
Yeah.
like in the middle of that. I mean, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So this year, while it was absolutely insane for everyone and it was hard for journalists just because with everything going on, for me, again, being a new journalist, this was I was so honored to be covering history because that's what we covered. Anyone
Right.
who was out there was covering history. Protests that were happening in Atlanta and across the nation.
And it's usually two people, right?
Yeah.
So it's
I was
usually
with someone.
the camera and the talent, and that's
Yeah.
it. I mean,
Yeah, I was with someone, but again, I was paired with either another woman. I was barely paired with another man. It was like once or twice I was paired with another
I
man.
noticed there was a
We had no
clip.
security.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. It's a dangerous job if you think about it.
Yeah.
People don't seem to think about it like that when someone goes out there. I mean, just being in the middle of the highway somewhere, sometimes reporting, or
Yeah.
in some neighborhood, in this case, in the middle of Atlanta, in the middle of this whole deal.
What really was scary was, again, covering protests because we were covering these, like I told you, my shift was 3 to midnight. But when we were covering protests, I was coming in at 1 p.m. and I wasn't leaving till 5 o'clock in the morning the next day.
Wow.
Yeah, I was working. I wasn't eating. There was no breaks. And it was during the summertime, so it's hot. You have all this camera equipment, and it was very dangerous, especially the first few weeks that we were doing it. The first night that I covered protests, I'll never forget. I got a call. Hey, can you come in early? There's a protest that's happening. And during the time, protests started to erupt in other states. So I was a little nervous, and they were like, "Oh, don't worry about it. There hasn't been a riot in Atlanta since Rodney King. Don't you worry about it. Just come on in." And I'm like,
They threw you out
"Okay,
there.
yeah." And that night was literally insane. I got shot that night in my leg with
What?
a pepper bullet. I
Oh,
got by. It was a police officer that shot me, but he just shot it into the crowd, and it hit me. And
wow.
I got tear gassed every single day that I worked for 3 months. Like tear gassed. Like I thought I was gonna die. It
Wow.
was crazy.
What's the feeling? I never had tear
Oh,
gas
it's
anywhere.
I've been maced before by accident, going out in New York and going out to the club and people get crazy and they mace the crowd and I thought that was like bad, but getting tear gas, they were using like the National Guard was out there and the Army, everyone was out there, so they were using that heavy duty tear gas, and that was it was so powerful. I mean, at one point, I really thought I was gonna die because it was so much that I inhaled it, and so I couldn't breathe. And so thankfully there was a police officer nearby, and he put water on my face, and he's like, "Are you okay?" But yeah,
Wow.
it was like torment every single day, working these long hours, getting tear gassed. That I remember that night. We were getting pushed and shoved, and they almost broke into a CBS 46 fan that night too. Like they threw a brick at it. They stole one of the. It was just crazy.
Yeah, that's definitely history, and a lot of people see the stuff on TV,
Yeah.
but hearing it like basically behind the
Yeah.
scenes, that's totally. I mean, it's serious.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, I mean, you think about, I guess, because you're in media, you think about the other people, that the reporters, the camera people, the
Yeah.
techs, the journalists that is out there covering the stories. I mean, it's obviously it's dangerous, but I mean, how does that affect your family at one point?
So, the first night that I was covering protests, again, we didn't expect it to get to what it was. And so, anytime that I go out, we all share our location with each other. So, my family always knows where I'm at, especially working night side. Um, but my mom, anytime I was working, my mom, especially during that time, she would put on the news on CBS 46, and she really just covered it. And when it started getting bad is when she started to get really nervous. And at one point, when I had gotten tear gas before I had even gotten shot, I had called her, and she started crying and she was freaking out. She's like, "I'm gonna go down there. I'm gonna go down there." Like, and I'm like, "Ma, you can't get me. I'm working." But she just wanted to be there to know that I was okay and to make
Just
sure that
making
I
sure
was.
her baby was good.
Yes, they were gonna come there. So every time that I worked, during the protests, my parents were very, very nervous. But I did my best to try to keep them updated and to try to let them know that I was okay. But it's funny because growing up and finally making the decision that I wanted to be a journalist, I remember watching these defining moments as a young kid and watching the news, and I remember saying, like, I can't wait till I'm there. I can't wait till I'm in the position where I can cover historic stories like this. And so although covering protests was crazy, for me it was like, it was eye-opening. It was like, I made it. Like, I'm here.
Yeah, you
I can say that now.
and you did just exactly like you said. You cover history.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say that later on. I mean, you have that experience,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's just
Even COVID.
remarkable.
Yeah, even covering COVID has been historic.
Yeah, you did a couple of stories on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, were you afraid? Because at the beginning, nobody really knew
Yeah.
how this was gonna pan out.
Mm-hmm.
Were you afraid that you could get infected, and
Yeah.
because a lot of police officers, everybody at the beginning, I mean, I seen some clips in the past where they had like the whole hazmat to go see their kids.
Yeah.
Doctors didn't even go home for weeks. I mean, some of them probably months, and I mean, reporters were out there too. So
Yeah.
how do you feel about that? Besides the point of already being in danger in a riot, but I mean, it
Yeah.
was. I mean, this virus was out there too. So do you think about that at the time or not?
In the beginning I did. But again, I feel like in the beginning the virus was people were undermining the virus, and we didn't really know to what extent of like how dangerous this was. So I think that in the beginning, it didn't really affect me. I was like, all right, whatever. But then when I started to see that the death toll was rising, and I started to see even at my job, they were telling everybody, listen, if you're not a photographer, if you're not a reporter, you can work from home. Like, I mean, and then coming into the newsroom, they limited access. They said you are not allowed to come to the newsroom unless it's like an emergency. So starting to see that, I was like, okay, maybe this is a little serious. But I knew it was the job, and I knew that that's what came with the job, was that, you know, when these big moments happen, a lot of people don't realize that, like, while they get to stay home or they get to protect themselves, the journalists are the ones that have to go out in danger and
Right.
have to go out. You know, when there's a storm, you stay home. When there's a blizzard, you stay home. But we're going out to the storms and blizzard. I mean, I've done
You got
weather
to get
coverage.
exposed.
I've done weather coverage, and literally there was a tornado a mile away. And I've done weather coverage, and I was like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, this is too
that
serious. I
that
draw
wasn't
the
your
line
thing.
here. Yeah. So I guess that's the difference, is that, you know,
but
it comes with the job.
but there is a bright side to this. You get to meet
Hmm.
people. You got to meet the mayor, right?
I got
Interviewer.
I got to interview Shaq.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
that's that's amazing.
Yeah.
Who else? I saw Chris Tucker.
Chris Tucker, Shaq, 21 Savage, Lil Baby. That one was like one of my favorites. Um, Megan Good, the actress. Ludacris's mom. She was doing like a fundraiser, charity. Who else? I feel like I'm missing a few.
There's a whole bunch. I've seen some on your
Shaq, Chris
website
Tucker.
too.
Yeah. I just recently interviewed the face of Call of Duty, the
Oh
latest
wow.
Call of Duty. He's a Latino actor, and so I got to interview him. So that was pretty cool.
That is definitely cool. Now, on your website, I noticed you have a couple of those interviews. How do you go about, a lot of people don't think about creating a website for their personality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but obviously now everybody's getting the hang of it. How do you know, transition
Mm-hmm.
into or thought about doing a website for yourself?
So, unfortunately, I got laid off from my job at CBS 46 in September. The corporation that owns CBS 46 had a nationwide layoff because of COVID-19 budget cuts. So, it wasn't my job that laid me off, it was corporate. And corporate got rid of a lot of the departments in at my station, got rid of a lot of people because they also own several stations around the U.S. And so,
And that's has happened with a lot of
yeah,
companies. Not, I mean, just in media, but it overall. So it affected you that way as
yeah.
well.
And I'll never forget that time I got that call. I was on my way to work.
Oh wow.
And I got the call, and I was devastated, honestly, because anyone could tell you I loved my job. I still love what I do. I love my job, but
Right.
like working there, I really did enjoy.
Yeah, it amplified your
Yeah.
your passion because
Yeah.
you had a not only obviously a financial income, but you could explore what you love.
Yeah, and I always tell people, like, although the job pays very well, it's not about the money for me. Like, I always tell people, I could be getting paid little to nothing, but as long as I can tell stories and be a journalist and report, that's all that matters. It's just a perk that, they pay really well. But
Right.
yeah, they basically called me and said, listen, we're so sorry, but due to COVID-19 budget cuts, we have to lay you off. And like I said, I felt like my heart just sank. This was my first professional job, technically out of grad school, after having a baby, being in a new city.
And you were covering history.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. The truth is that job opened up so many doors for me. Aside, obviously God opened those doors, but the job in itself allowed me to, like you mentioned, cover history. I got to meet a lot of good people. I got to network, and I really got to learn the ins and outs of Atlanta. And so, yeah, I was devastated. And then when I called some of my coworkers to find out that a lot of my coworkers who I was cool with also got laid off. I mean, it was anchors, reporters, photographers,
yeah, it's been tough.
producers. I mean, people who have just won Emmy Awards were getting laid off. So it had nothing to do with our work ethic. It had nothing to do with something that we lacked.
It's
It was
just
just having to make that hard call. And I was the youngest and also the newest technically employee, although I was there for almost 2 years. It's usually the oldest ones and the new ones are, get cut and then in between.
Gotcha.
So I feel like I was probably the easiest for them to cut because I was still technically kind of new. But but yeah, after that, I really, I said, you know what, I'm gonna start my own website. And it first started as like my portfolio because I was like, now I have to apply to journalism jobs. I'm gonna showcase the videos that I've done on CBS 46, things that I've done in grad school. And then I decided, you know what, let me just turn it into a website, newswithkayla.com. And that's how it started.
And did you edit those, those
Yeah.
videos yourself?
Yeah.
Did you create the website yourself?
Yeah, I created the website myself. Everything you see, I did it myself. The videos, how I wanted it to look.
Did you already know how to do that, or
I did.
oh, you did?
Yeah.
So you study graphics and all of that, or I mean, the website
Yeah.
itself. Okay.
I in school I learned a little bit, but like I YouTube everything.
I
So
got you.
also, yeah, I just again grad school opened up a lot of doors for me, allowing me to learn audio, video, reporting, writing, shooting, editing, all that stuff. So I knew how to make the website. So I made the website. I posted all my videos on there. And then just staying on top of news 24/7 and
What's the name
staying
of the website one more time?
newswithkayla.com.
Newswithcaleb.com.
Yeah. So in doing that, I was like, okay, you know what? This person has a movie coming out, or this person has a show coming out, or this person, wants to tell their story. And so that's how I was able to do it. And through that, I've had some really good stories. Like I mentioned, the Latin actor. He is the face of the latest Call of Duty, which came out a few weeks ago.
Was it something that you just happened to land, or you contact him, or how did that work out?
So what I first started doing was I made a list of the people that I wanted to interview. And then I individually looked them up and I said, okay, I want to interview this person. Let me see out of this list who has something coming up in the next few weeks, because then that would be my in. And then when I would write down, okay, this person has this coming out, person's releasing an album, this one's releasing a single, I then would do research on who is their publicist, who is their manager, who is their agency. And then I would go down the line and I would email everyone. And again, that came with its challenges as well. Although I had a website, although I had experience, there were still people who felt like maybe my website wasn't big enough, or because I wasn't a known outlet like Complex, Rolling Stone, New York Times. They weren't so quick to give me interviews. But in doing that, I had publicists reach back out to me. They said, yes, we'd love to get an interview with you. And then they would add me to their list so that whenever they had any other clients who had something coming out, they would reach out to me to do an interview with them.
So one of the main things about our podcast here is to, empower people with knowledge, empower mainly the Latin community, but anyone, obviously.
Yes.
But Latinos, sometimes they think, it's hard to get into whatever job.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they have a dream to become a journalist, a DJ, a radio host,
Mm-hmm.
or videographer, designer, whatever. But the thing is, not a lot of people get to tell their story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons you're here. And we thank you for that. We thank you for that time. But we also want to, you basically went through school, went through tough time moving to a totally new world.
Yeah.
And then, got the job, got to work in historical moments, and then your website doing your own thing. What can you tell, like, the young new generation that's coming out and it's like, man, this is tough, even though, there's a lot of opportunities out there.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it can be daunting. You're looking at it and you're like, well, I don't even know where to start. And now that, you have gone through all this situation and you're working on freelance right now,
Mm-hmm.
but you have your own website, what can you tell this new generation, or anyone really? It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be a young person. I mean, it's the whole landscape has changed due to to COVID-19, and because of many companies making changes, the whole thing, the digital domain has changed. The landscape has changed for everybody. What can you tell them, like, to motivate them or to give them tips, what's one of the things or a couple of things that you can tell them?
I think the new generation is going to give us a run for our money because they're the ones that are constantly coming up with new ways and to do things. And like you work in radio and everything is going digital now.
Correct.
So yeah, I would just encourage them to keep going. To keep going. I feel like now we have different outlets where, before it was a lot harder for us to get a job, for people to do certain things that they like. And so now we're seeing that, social media is a huge thing, right? You have Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. And so a lot of the newer generation, they'll have like these really good ideas and now they can start a podcast. And now all they have to do is put it on YouTube and put it on Instagram. And so I would just encourage them to keep going, to use all of their resources that they have at hand. You can get really famous now on social media and just being really creative. All you need is like a blog to pick you up, to repost your video, and all of a sudden you have all these followers, and it really enhances your business and enhances what you want to do. So just be really active. Whatever you want to do, go for it 100%. And there are going to be times where, look at me, even with a master's degree and with experience, I still doubt myself all the time. I even now in this season, I'm like, I'm never gonna find a job, I'm never gonna work again, even though I know God has a bigger plan and it is gonna come sooner than later. Yeah, just keep going, and when something is your passion, go for it 100% and never ever give up, because I look back on it now and I was like, imagine if I would have given up then. I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't have accomplished all that I have accomplished. And although, again, for me, this is still kind of like the beginning, I'm still scratching the surface, although I've been doing this for a few years. I just have to remind myself, what if I would give up now? Who knows where I'm about to be next?
Right.
And what opportunities I can miss out on just by doubting myself. So try to always think positive and to use your resources and to go for it 100%.
Amazing words. Now, technically, even though you have your master's, you did mention that you did a lot of YouTube videos. So what kind of tips can you give people on that?
Actually, I need to be more active on YouTube. One thing that I've learned, I've done a lot of research on social media tips, is to be active. And something that I need to work more on is being more active on YouTube.
But I think that's, step by step, because, it can be overwhelming trying to be everywhere.
Yeah.
People's like, okay, first it was Facebook, then Instagram, then
Now it's
Snapchat,
TikTok.
then TikTok, then LinkedIn, and that's
it's a
growing
lot.
to and YouTube, and who knows what else is going to, what's going to come out next.
Mm-hmm.
But, in the mean of learning yourself, even though you had an MBA,
Mm-hmm.
you watch a lot of videos to maybe update on some of the stuff that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of videos do you watch?
I watch a lot of tutorials, believe it or not. Like, if I'm editing a video or if I went out and did a story on something, I usually edit a lot of tutorials. I try to see what's current, try to see what kind of effects people are using. That's pretty much a lot of what I absorb, is just tutorials. What are people doing? How can I enhance my YouTube activity? How can I enhance my social media presence? But I think the biggest thing is just creating content. That's really it. It doesn't matter how fancy you get with the effects or the editing. At the end of the day, that's not what's going to matter. It's the content and what you bring to these platforms.
That's very accurate. That content is king right
Mm-hmm.
now, and it doesn't have to be, like you said, super fancy.
No, yeah.
Even though some people do take it to that level, but I
Yeah.
think it's step by step, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where can people find you? And obviously we're gonna have this and the credits and all that, but I want you to tell people how to find you.
I'm very active on Instagram. My Instagram is the only Kayla. So TheOnlyKyla. My website, News with Kayla. You can always contact me on there. I have a submission form where you can email me. I always tell people I'm always accepting pitches. If you have a story idea or if you have a story that you'd like to put on my website, to contact me. I've been doing a lot of my interviews via Zoom just because of COVID and because sometimes I'll have an interviewer who's in New York or LA or something like that. And so Zoom is perfect. So you don't have to specifically live in Atlanta if you have a story or if you want me to interview you or you want me to report on your story. You can be anywhere in the world as long as we can do it via Zoom. So News with Kayla is my website where you can see how the stories I've reported on, the stories I've edited, the stories that I've written, everything on that website is done by me. And my YouTube is Kayla Rivera TV. And so while I showcase my stories on my website, I also showcase them on YouTube as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming by. We really appreciate your time because I know you have a baby,
Yeah, I
you
do.
know, your husband, your family, so I know that you don't live like super close to our studio. So we really do appreciate taking the time out to come out here. And, we wish you the best, of course, on all your new ideas and, whatever idea that you come up with, and hopefully, you're gonna become a bigger star. So
Amen. From your mouth to God's ears.
thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
You're welcome. And of course, follow us on our YouTube channel, Mega Atlanta Radio. Download the app, Mega Atlanta Radio, for music streaming 24/7. And of course, follow us on social media, Mega Atlanta Radio. Thank you so much.